Hi, I'm Kaylin. For 7 long days, my in-laws didn't answer a single call, not one text, not even a sign of life. My husband said, they're just busy. But when we drove out there, the house was a wreck. Windows shattered, walls scorched, silence thick like ash. Then I saw it. Something moved inside the old wardrobe in their bedroom. And when I opened that door, my knees almost gave out. What I found inside made me dial 911 with shaking hands, because some truths don't stay buried. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment below, because by the end of this story, you'll realize some houses don't need ghosts to be haunted. It started with the silence. Not the peaceful kind that follows a long day, but the kind that hums in the back of your skull when something isn't right. For 7 days, my in-laws hadn't answered a single call, text, or email. Margaret usually replied within minutes. She loved forwarding recipes and chain prayers, but this time, nothing. I told Lucan on Monday, on Wednesday, again Friday morning. Each time, he said the same thing. "Mom probably broke her phone again," he muttered, scrolling through the news on his tablet. "You know how she is." But this time, I didn't buy it. Margaret might forget passwords, but she never forgot people. Especially us. Especially Eden. By late afternoon, the unease had crawled into my chest. "Let's drive over," I said finally. "Just to check." Lucan hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's an hour there and back. They'll laugh at us if everything's fine." "Then let them laugh," I said. The drive from Austin was quiet, just the sound of tires on wet pavement. Autumn light stretched long across the road, thin and coppery. Lucan hummed along to an old country song, trying to lighten the mood, but my stomach stayed knotted. Every bend of the highway seemed heavier, like the air itself thickened the closer we got. When we turned onto their street, I noticed it first, the mailbox bulging with envelopes. A rolled-up newspaper from Monday still sat in the grass, edges dark with dew. The porch light was off, though Margaret always left it on, even at noon. "Hugh probably forgot," Lucan murmured, but his voice cracked halfway through. The front steps creaked under our shoes. The air smelled stale, like wet carpet and mildew. I pressed the doorbell. Nothing. No footsteps, no muffled voice from the kitchen. I tried the knob. Unlocked. "Margaret," Lucan called out. "Dad, it's us." The moment we stepped inside, my throat tightened. The living room was a storm of disarray, sofas pulled from the wall, cushions torn open. The dining table was on its side, plates scattered, some shattered across the floor. The old porcelain angel Margaret kept on the mantel, the one she said watched over the house, lay face down in the dust, one wing cracked clean off. "Jesus," Lucan whispered. "What happened here?" He picked up the landline receiver. Silent. The phone cord dangled, severed. I walked deeper into the house, calling out again. "Margaret? Hugh?" My voice echoed strangely, swallowed by the empty rooms. Then I saw it. The dinner plate still on the counter, congealed gravy, cold peas. They'd eaten halfway through a meal and just vanished. Something about the quiet felt wrong, as if the house itself was holding its breath. A soft sound broke it, a faint rustle from down the hall. Not loud, but sharp enough to freeze me. I looked at Lucan. He'd gone pale. "It's probably the cat," he said, though his tone didn't believe it. We followed the noise to the master bedroom. The door stood ajar, one hinge bent. Inside, the bed was stripped. Sheets on the floor, dresser drawers open and empty. A trail of broken glass glimmered faintly in the fading light, leading toward the closet. Lucan exhaled shakily. "Stay here." "No." My voice was firmer than I expected. "We go together." But when he took a step toward the hallway, maybe there's someone else in the house, I saw movement, the faintest flicker behind the wardrobe doors. A shadow shifting. "Lucan," I whispered. "Did you see that?" He turned toward the doorway, scanning the hall. I inched forward, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. The air felt heavier near the closet. The smell of dust and something else, something metallic, hung faintly there. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. I half expected a raccoon or some stray animal to leap out. I opened the door slowly, inch by inch. Inside, in the dim space between coats and hanging linens, 2 eyes stared back at me. A boy, no older than 6, curled up in the corner, knees to chest. His face was smeared with dirt, his lips trembling. He clutched a frayed blue blanket to his chest, eyes darting toward the floor as if afraid to speak. "It's okay," I whispered, kneeling. "You're safe now. What's your name?" He shook his head. His voice came out hoarse, almost broken. "They hurt them." My skin went cold. Lucan rushed over. "Kaylin, what?" He froze when he saw the child. "Oh my God!" I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. The dial tone felt deafening in the thick air. "This is 911, I stammered when the dispatcher answered. There's a child. He's hiding. The house, my in-laws. Please send someone." Lucan tried to ask the boy questions, but he only repeated the same thing, softer each time. "They hurt them." Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance, first faint, then closer, pulsing through the walls. Red and blue lights danced faintly across the cracked mirror. Lucan turned to me. "He looks like Liam, doesn't he?" I shook my head slowly. "Lucan, this isn't our nephew." The boy lifted his gaze then, and for a moment, I saw something so familiar in his eyes it made my stomach twist. The boy's first words changed everything. I remember holding him, his small fingers clutching at my sleeve, while the house filled with flashing lights and footsteps. The officers moved carefully, as though afraid the walls themselves might collapse under their boots. The once quiet street outside was now crowded with police cruisers, their radios crackling through the open door. Liam, that was the name an officer gently coaxed out of him, sat wrapped in a gray blanket near the entryway. His sweater was too small, sleeves stretched halfway up his arms. He kept his eyes on the floor, rocking slightly as a paramedic checked his pulse. Detective Harris arrived just after the paramedics. He was tall, gray at the temples, his badge hanging from a chain around his neck. His tone was calm but clipped. "Mrs. Rhodes, can you tell me exactly what happened?" I was still shaking. "We came to check on my in-laws. They hadn't answered calls all week. The door was unlocked." The house looked like this when we walked in. Harris scribbled in his notebook, nodding. "And the child? You found him in a closet?" "In the wardrobe," I said softly. "He was hiding. Said someone hurt them." Lucan was outside, pacing in the cold. I could see him through the window, phone pressed to his ear, trying again to call his parents. The line never rang. I knew the look on his face, that stubborn hope that made you believe, just for a moment, that everything awful might still be fixable. Harris crouched near Liam, his voice steady. "Buddy, can you tell me who hurt them? Who was here with you?" The boy flinched and shook his head. His voice was barely a whisper. "They were here. Then the man came." "What man?" I asked, kneeling beside him, but he just stared at the wall, breathing fast. I grabbed a water bottle from my bag and handed it to him. His hands trembled as he drank. When he set it down, he reached for a napkin on the table and, without looking up, started drawing. Crooked lines, a rectangle, stairs leading down. Harris leaned closer. "What's that, Liam?" "The place," he murmured. "Down there." I followed the direction of his finger, to the kitchen door that led to the basement. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. "Lucan," I called, stepping toward the hallway. "We need to look downstairs." Harris raised a hand. "Not yet. Let my team secure the area first." But my mind was already racing. The Rhodeses never used the basement much. Margaret always said it smelled too damp for her antiques. The last time I'd been down there was during a Christmas dinner years ago. I remembered the concrete floor, the clutter of boxes, the sound of the old furnace groaning. While Harris organized his team, I noticed something else. A faint, dark smear on Liam's sleeve. It wasn't dirt. The color was too deep, too rusty. My heart lurched. "This isn't his blood," I whispered. The detective turned sharply. "Say again?" "It's not his," I repeated. "He doesn't have any cuts." Harris looked at one of the officers. "Take that sample for analysis." Lucan finally came back in, his face ashen. "Still no answer," he said. "Their phones go straight to voicemail." "Mr. Rhodes," Harris said evenly, "did your parents have any recent disputes? Arguments? Business troubles? Anything that might have put them at risk?" Lucan shook his head. "They're retired. Everyone loves them." But I hesitated. "There was an argument last month," I said quietly. "About an estate sale. Margaret sold a piece that someone claimed was stolen. An old pocket watch. It caused trouble online." Lucan shot me a look. "That was nothing, Kaylin. Some crank trying to make a scene." "Still," I said. "She was upset. She said someone had threatened her." The detective scribbled faster. "Threatened how?" Lucan exhaled sharply. "This is insane." "You're acting like they were criminals." "No one's saying that," Harris replied. "We just need every detail." While they spoke, my gaze drifted back toward the kitchen. The door to the basement was slightly ajar. The handle hung crooked, as if someone had forced it. Then an officer called out, "Detective, you'll want to see this." We followed him to the doorway. The lock, an old brass latch, was shattered from the inside. "Stay back," Harris ordered, signaling to the other officers. But something inside me pushed forward. The air that rose from below smelled damp, almost metallic. I grabbed a flashlight from the counter and stepped onto the first stair before anyone could stop me. "Mrs. Rhodes, don't," the detective warned. "I have to," I said, my voice steady even as my heart hammered. "If they're down there." The stairs creaked under my weight. Dust floated in the beam of the light. The basement looked just as I remembered. Boxes stacked high, furniture under sheets. But near the far wall, the floor was smeared with mud, small footprints leading toward a broken cabinet. I moved closer, swallowing the knot in my throat. The flashlight flickered over the shattered wood, the torn shelves, and something caught on a nail. A scarf, pale beige with tiny embroidered flowers along the edge. Margaret's. I knew it instantly. She wore it every Sunday. It was torn down the middle and dark stains bloomed along the fabric. I didn't need to smell it to know what those stains were. But I lifted it anyway, just enough to feel the faint trace of her perfume. Lavender and something else. Something sharp that didn't belong. "Lucan," I whispered, my voice breaking as I climbed back toward the light. "Your mother didn't just disappear." The scarf still smelled like her perfume. And something else. Something rotten. Even after the police sealed off the basement, that scent lingered on my hands. I couldn't wash it away. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the delicate embroidery, the torn edges, the stains that refused to fade. Margaret's scent, lavender and sugar cookies, had turned into something that made my stomach twist. Lucan and I spent the rest of the night at the station giving statements. Harris asked the same questions over and over: when we last saw them, whether anyone had keys, if we knew of any enemies. But when we got home, silence hit harder than the interrogation. It was nearly 3 a.m. The house felt hollow, like every clock had stopped ticking. Lucan went straight to the shower without a word. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone. Every creak in the floorboards above sounded alive, like the house itself was breathing. When I looked toward our hallway mirror, I could swear I saw something move behind me, but it was only my own reflection. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying Liam's small voice. "The man came. I heard it over the hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of the blinds, even the faint tapping of tree branches against the window. That sentence looped in my head until it became something else. A warning. By sunrise, I was sitting in the living room again, the porcelain angel I'd brought home from the Rhodes mantel now resting on the coffee table. One of its wings had broken clean off during the police search. I ran my thumb over the jagged edge. Somehow, that tiny angel felt heavier than everything else that had happened. That's when a memory crept in, the last time I'd been at their house, 2 months ago. It had been a warm afternoon. Eden was running through the hallway, her laughter echoing off the walls. Margaret followed her, smiling but distracted, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. When Eden darted toward the basement door, Margaret had moved fast for her age, slamming it shut so hard the frame rattled. "Sweetheart," she said breathlessly, crouching down to Eden's height. "You shouldn't play down there. It's dark and messy." I remember laughing, thinking she was just being overprotective. But when I caught her expression, a quick, terrified glance at the doorknob, my smile faded. Later that same day, while Lucan was out helping his father sort old paintings, Margaret had taken me aside. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Kaylin," she'd said, gripping my wrist gently, "if anything ever happens, check the wardrobe." At the time, I brushed it off. She'd been anxious lately, forgetting names, worrying about strangers on the street. I told Lucan afterward, and he'd sighed. "Mom's losing it," he said. "She's lonely. Don't take it seriously." But now those words kept looping in my head, clearer than ever. Check the wardrobe. Was she already scared then? Did she know something was coming? When Lucan came downstairs that morning, he looked worn out. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. "They'll find them," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Mom probably got caught up in some misunderstanding." I studied him. "Lucan, she left clues. The scarf. The things Liam said. You don't think this was random, do you?" He set the cup down too hard. "I think you're letting fear run wild. My parents aren't—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Let's just wait for the police, okay?" His tone told me to drop it. But something inside refused. That night, when Lucan finally fell asleep, I went into the guest room where we'd stored the few boxes we'd taken from his parents' house. The air smelled faintly of dust and cedar. I sifted through old photo albums, ledgers, postcards, ordinary things. Then, under a pile of folded quilts, my hand brushed against something hard. It was a small black tape recorder, the kind people used decades ago. The play button was worn smooth. For a long moment, I just stared at it, pulse racing. Margaret had always been old-fashioned. She still kept handwritten grocery lists. But why hide this? I clicked it on. Static hissed, followed by a faint shuffle, like fabric brushing a microphone. Then her voice, soft, trembling, unmistakable. "If you hear this," she paused, breath catching. "He found out. Don't trust." The tape cut out, replaced by a wall of static. I replayed it 3 times, but it ended the same way. Right after that word, trust. My throat tightened. Who was he? From the doorway, a floorboard creaked. I turned, expecting Lucan half asleep, maybe confused why I was up so late. He stood there in the dim light, one hand braced against the frame, eyes fixed on the recorder in my hand. "She was trying to warn us," I whispered. "But about who?" Lucan's expression didn't change. He didn't blink. But in the silence that followed, I saw something in his eyes, something I couldn't name yet, but it felt like recognition. Lucan's eyes told me he already knew the answer. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the kitchen clock, every second stretching too long, too loud. He leaned against the table where his mother once arranged her antiques, tracing a finger over the scratched wood as if it could offer him a way out of this moment. "You're not going to say anything?" I finally asked, my voice quiet but sharp. Lucan exhaled slowly. "There's something I should have told you before." "Before what?" I asked. "Before we found your mother's scarf. Before the tape. Before you looked me in the eye and pretended you didn't know what was going on?" He rubbed his temples. "Please, just let me explain." I waited, arms crossed. He didn't look at me when he said it. Dad had debts, real ones, to a man named Dalton Reese, not a bank, someone who deals in cash, threats, and favors. I thought they handled it years ago, but it never went away. The name hit me like cold water. "And you didn't think that was worth mentioning?" "I didn't want to drag you into it," he said, voice rising. "It wasn't my mess." I laughed, bitter and small. "Your mess? Lucan, your parents vanished. There's a child in their closet who said, 'The man came.' How far does this go?" He looked like he wanted to vanish too. "They were desperate. Dad mortgaged the house to cover one of Caleb's failed investments." The words knocked the breath out of me. Caleb, Lucan's older brother, the golden son who always had an excuse for losing other people's money. "Wait," I said slowly. "Are you telling me your brother was involved with that man?" Lucan hesitated, then nodded once. "It started as a loan. He promised he could flip it in a few weeks. But Reese doesn't forgive debt. He collects." My mind reeled. The man Liam mentioned. The man came. Could it have been Caleb's partner? Or Reese himself? I slammed my palm against the table. "You let me walk into that house blind. You knew something was off and you said nothing." Lucan's voice cracked. "Because I thought it was over. They told me they paid it off." "Then why did your mother sound terrified on that tape?" I shot back. "Why did she tell me not to trust someone?" He didn't answer. The silence filled the space between us, thick and heavy. Then the phone rang. The sound sliced through the tension like a blade. Lucan froze, then reached for it. But I got there first. "Hello? Mrs. Rhodes, this is Detective Harris." His tone was all business. "Our forensic team recovered a phone from the furnace in your in-law's basement. It's partially burned, but the call log survived." I felt Lucan watching me as I asked, "And?" "There were multiple outgoing calls made the day before the disappearance," Harris said. "All to your husband's number." My fingers went numb around the receiver. "You're sure?" "Yes, ma'am. Same number, repeated several times." When I hung up, the words came out like a whisper. "They tried to call you." Lucan's brow furrowed. "That can't be right. My phone was—" He stopped himself. "Broken," I said, finishing for him. "That's what you told me. It just happened to be broken that entire week?" He looked away. "I didn't pick up, okay? They'd been calling non-stop about money, about Caleb. I was done being the middleman." I stared at him, disbelief rising like bile. "So when they reached out for help, you ignored them." "I didn't know!" His voice cracked. "I didn't know it was that serious." The room went quiet again, except for the faint hiss of the heating vent. I looked at this man, my husband, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. For years, I'd believed Lucan was the rational one, the voice of calm in every storm. But now, watching him shrink under the weight of his own guilt, I couldn't tell whether he was a victim or an accomplice. I took a step back. "If your parents tried to warn you," I said slowly, "then who were they really afraid of? Him or you?" His head snapped up, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. Fear, anger, maybe shame. "That's not fair," he whispered. "Neither is finding out everything I believed about this family might have been a lie." The question hung between us like smoke, refusing to clear. Lucan didn't answer. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving the floorboards groaning under his steps. I stood there for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, like the house itself was waiting for me to break. By dawn, the sound of engines pulled me from a restless half-sleep. I went to the window and froze. News vans lined the street, their antennas jutting into the sky like silver needles. Reporters in coats stood on the sidewalk, their voices echoing through microphones. Cameras pointed straight at our house. When I opened the front door, a woman with a sharp voice called out, "Mrs. Rhodes, is it true there was blood found in the basement?" Another shouted, "Do you have any idea where your in-laws are?" I shut the door before they could ask more. My hands trembled as I locked it. Lucan sat on the couch, pale and hollow-eyed. His elbows rested on his knees, hands pressed together as if in prayer. Then, as if all the noise outside crushed him at once, he slumped forward. "This is my fault," he whispered. "All of it." Before I could respond, a loud hiss came from outside. Someone had spray-painted across our white picket fence in red. "Murder House." Lucan stumbled out onto the porch, staring at the dripping letters. His shoulders shook, and then he just sank to the ground, head in his hands. I didn't move to comfort him. Not this time. Detective Harris arrived an hour later, his expression somewhere between pity and exhaustion. "You two should stay somewhere else for now," he said gently. "Let us finish our work here. This kind of attention, it's not safe." I shook my head. "If I leave, I'll never know what happened." He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Just be careful, Mrs. Rhodes." When he left, I stood on the porch, the wind carrying faint snippets of the reporter's chatter. Behind me, the house creaked again. Every sound inside these walls felt like a heartbeat I couldn't trace. Later that afternoon, when most of the vans had left, a woman approached me quietly from across the street. She wasn't carrying a camera, just a notepad and a worn leather satchel. Her expression was kind, but her eyes were sharp. "Elise Tanner," she said, offering a quick smile. "I'm with the Chronicle. I'm not here to sensationalize. I think you deserve to know what you're up against." I hesitated, then nodded toward the porch. "We can talk here." She sat beside me and slipped a photo from her bag. In it, Lucan's brother Caleb stood at a charity gala, champagne glass in hand, smiling too wide. Next to him was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, thick-build, slick hair, and a watch that probably cost more than my car. "Dalton Reese," Elise said. "Private lender, black market operator, rumored to run his business through fake foundations. He doesn't loan money, he launders it." I looked at the picture again, feeling the blood drain from my face. "You're saying Caleb worked with him?" Elise nodded slowly. "Not just him. Your husband's family may have been covering his tracks. The mortgage, the estate sales, the sudden silence. It all fits." My breath came shallow. "And you're sure?" Her tone softened. "I've been chasing Dalton for years. When your in-laws disappeared, his name came up in the chatter. Be careful, Mrs. Rhodes. If this goes deeper than money, you're not just dealing with debt. You're dealing with secrets people kill to protect." She left me with the photo and her card. That night, after Lucan went upstairs, I spread everything across the dining table. Margaret's scarf, the tape recorder, the photo, my notes. I started writing down every detail, every date, every word Liam had said. My handwriting grew steadier with each line. Grief was giving way to something sharper. Control. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just documented. When the house finally fell quiet, I checked on Liam. He was asleep at first, small and curled up under the blanket. But sometime after midnight, he started thrashing, whispering in his sleep. I leaned close. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." He gasped awake, eyes wide and wet with tears. "Uncle was here," he whispered hoarsely. I froze. "What did you say?" "Uncle," he repeated. "He was yelling at Grandpa. Grandpa said no more money, Then, a crash, and fire downstairs. His tiny hands clutched my arm. The man came after that. My mind raced. The furnace, the burned phone, the broken basement lock. Someone had tried to erase everything. I pulled him into my arms, heart pounding. "You're safe now," I whispered, but my gaze drifted toward the hallway. Lucan stood there in the dim light, silent, watching us. The way Lucan looked back at me, it wasn't grief anymore. It was fear. After that night, something in him changed. He stopped talking unless he had to. He barely ate, barely looked me in the eye. Every few minutes, he'd unlock his phone, scroll, then set it down again without saying a word. The silence between us wasn't quiet anymore. It was suffocating. We checked into a small roadside motel 2 towns over, away from the reporters and the spray-painted fence. The sign outside buzzed in neon, half the letters flickering out. The rain hadn't stopped since we left the house. It pressed against the windows like it wanted in, a dull, endless rhythm that matched the heaviness in my chest. Liam stayed close to me, never more than an arm's length away. Even when I brushed my teeth, he stood by the door, watching, his small hands twisting the hem of his shirt. "Can we go home soon?" he whispered once. I didn't have the heart to tell him I wasn't sure we had a home anymore. Lucan sat by the window, staring into the rain. The light from the parking lot outlined his profile, a man I barely recognized. His phone buzzed once, lighting up his face for a second before he turned it face down on the table. When I asked, "Who was that?" he only said, "No one that matters." I didn't press, but my gut told me he was lying. Sometime after midnight, the rain turned harder, angrier. The sound against the metal roof was like static, constant and sharp. I must have dozed off for an hour before a noise pulled me back, a faint whisper outside the door. At first I thought it was the wind. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Liam, and went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw only shadows. Then a shape bent down, a hand placing something at the threshold. The footsteps retreated, fading into the storm. I waited a few seconds before cracking the door open. The hallway was empty except for a single envelope, soaked at the corners. My fingers shook as I picked it up and carried it to the table. Lucan was still half asleep, his head in his hands. I slid the envelope open. Inside were a few glossy photographs, images of a half-burned phone, close-ups of melted plastic, charred numbers still visible on the keypad. Beneath the photos was a pawnshop receipt and a note. The paper was crinkled, the ink blurred from moisture, but I could still read the words. "He's still out there, and he's not done." The handwriting stopped my breath cold. It was Margaret's, her looping cursive, delicate, precise, impossible to mistake. Lucan jolted awake when I whispered his name. "Someone left this," I said, sliding the photos toward him. He frowned, flipping through them with trembling hands. "This has to be some cruel joke. My mother's—" He stopped mid-sentence, the color draining from his face. "Her handwriting," I finished quietly. He looked at the note again, his fingers gripping the edge so tightly the paper nearly tore. "No, she can't. She's gone, Kaylin. She's gone." The rain grew louder. It sounded like thousands of hands drumming on the glass. I called Detective Harris immediately. He picked up after one ring. "Mrs. Rhodes, listen carefully," he said. "You need to leave town tonight. Don't wait. Whoever's playing this game isn't done." "I can't leave," I said. "Not until I know—" "Kaylin," he interrupted, his voice sharper now. "You don't understand how dangerous this man is." Beside me, Lucan's head dropped into his hands. "He's not real," he muttered. "It's just someone trying to scare us." But his voice didn't sound convinced. His knuckles were white around the photographs. After Harris hung up, silence filled the room again. I could feel Lucan's panic bleeding through the quiet. "You think this is Caleb, don't you?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Lucan." Finally, he said, "I don't know what to think anymore." The hours dragged on until dawn. I must have drifted off again because when the phone rang, it startled me so hard I nearly dropped it. It was Elise Tanner. Her voice trembled. "Kaylin, I found something. An old voicemail left on a friend's landline. It's your mother-in-law. You need to hear it." She played it on speaker. The sound crackled with static before Margaret's voice broke through, thin, shaking, but unmistakable. "If anything happens to us," she said, "check the trust papers." He changed the names. Then silence. I felt the air leave my lungs. "He?" I asked. Elise hesitated. "Kaylin, your brother-in-law, Caleb. He changed the ownership documents months ago. It looks like he transferred the assets under your husband's name to cover his tracks. He framed the parents for fraud." The room seemed to tilt. I turned toward Lucan. His face had gone pale, eyes wide in horror. "Did you know?" I whispered. He shook his head, but the hesitation was too long. "I suspected," he said finally, voice cracking. "I just didn't have proof." I stared at him, every word sinking like ice. "So you let them take the blame. You let them disappear." Tears filled his eyes. I didn't know it would go this far. The anger that rose inside me wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, clean. "Your silence did this, Lucan. And now that boy, Liam, has to live with what your family brought into that house." He didn't argue. He couldn't. Outside, the rain began to ease, but the heaviness in the air didn't lift. I gathered the photos, the receipt, the note, and slipped them into my bag. "If I can't trust my husband," I whispered to myself, "then I'll trust the truth." I told Lucan I was going to clear my head. That was a lie. By the time the motel lights disappeared in my rearview mirror, my fingers had gone numb from gripping the steering wheel. The road to the Rhodes house wound through dark fields, and every passing mile felt heavier. The wipers kept time with my heartbeat, slow, steady, and scared. The house came into view like something half alive. Yellow police tape fluttered across the porch, glowing under the headlights. The windows were dark, but I could feel it watching me, remembering. I parked a block away, cut the engine, and let the silence swallow everything. When I stepped out, the air was wet and cold. My shoes sank into the mud as I crossed the yard, my breath fogging in the beam of my flashlight. I ducked under the tape, the plastic snapping against my coat. Every creak of the porch sounded like a voice trying to stop me. Inside, the smell hit first. Smoke, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The kind of smell that clings to grief. My light skimmed across the overturned furniture, the broken glass, the hollow places where a life used to be. I didn't know what I expected to find, just that I needed to see it again, without Lucan, without anyone else's version of the story. In the study, dust motes drifted through the beam of my light. Margaret's porcelain angel still sat on the mantel, now missing both wings. My stomach tightened. I turned slowly, scanning the room, and that's when I saw it. An old tape recorder half hidden beneath a folded scarf on the desk, the same pattern I remembered from Margaret's favorite shawl. I hesitated before pressing play. The machine whirred, then clicked, and a familiar voice broke through the static. "If you're hearing this," Margaret said, her voice thin but clear, "something has gone wrong. He's not who you think he is." I froze. Her words came unevenly, as if she'd recorded it in a hurry. "Your brother borrowed from dangerous people. We thought we could fix it, but he forged everything. Signatures, documents, our names. He said if we didn't keep quiet, he'd end it all, and take us with him." I pressed a hand to my mouth. The air felt colder with every word. Margaret's voice trembled. Lucan doesn't know the full truth. Don't blame him. But if you ever hear this, Kaylin, please, protect that boy. Don't let him near Caleb. Don't let him. The tape snapped to silence. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. I sank into the chair, trying to process what I'd just heard. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then, out of nowhere, a memory surfaced. Margaret on my wedding day, pinning my veil with trembling hands, her voice soft and warm. A house built on secrets will always crack from within. At the time, I'd smiled politely, not understanding. Now the words hit like a prophecy I'd ignored. I rewound the tape to listen again, hoping I'd misheard. That's when I heard something else. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Footsteps. Not on the tape. Upstairs. I froze, my hand still on the recorder. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, moving across the floor above me. Someone was in the house. I killed the flashlight and crouched behind the couch. My pulse hammered in my ears. Through the sliver of moonlight seeping through the curtains, I saw a shadow move across the hallway. Heavy boots, steady breathing. Then a voice, low, rough, impatient. Where's the second deed? The sound sent a chill straight through me. I edged forward just enough to see him. Dalton Reese. He looked exactly like the photos Elise had shown me. Square jaw, gray at the temples. A man who carried violence like a habit. He was rifling through drawers, tossing papers aside with practiced anger. His flashlight cut across the room in quick, sharp motions. I slid my phone from my pocket, praying the low battery wouldn't betray me. I hit record and aimed the camera through the gap in the couch cushions. My hands trembled, but I held still. Dalton muttered again. That idiot hid it here. I know he did. The second deed doesn't burn that easy. He slammed another drawer, papers scattering across the floor. For a second, he paused, turned his head. I stopped breathing. The beam of his flashlight swept across the walls, the floor, the couch, then landed on me. For half a heartbeat, neither of us moved. His eyes met mine, and before I could scream, the light went out. When I came to, it was morning, or at least I think it was. The sunlight that poured through the cracked blinds didn't feel real. My head throbbed, a dull, heavy ache at the base of my skull. My wrists burned where the rope cut into my skin. I tried to move, but the chair beneath me creaked, the sound sharp in the silence. Then came a noise, drawers opening, papers rustling, the deep rasp of a man muttering to himself, Dalton. He was still here. He stood by the desk, his broad shoulders tense as he rifled through stacks of old envelopes and crumpled files. The second deed, he muttered. She hid it somewhere. She was too damn clever. Every breath felt like fire in my chest. My phone lay on the floor a few feet away, screen cracked but still faintly glowing. The red recording light blinked. It hadn't stopped. I shifted slightly, the rope scraping my wrists raw. He must have heard because his head snapped toward me. You're awake, he said flatly. His voice was calm, too calm. That was worse than anger. He walked toward me, slow, deliberate, his boots leaving muddy prints on the old rug. You weren't supposed to see any of this, he said, crouching down until our eyes met. His breath smelled faintly of smoke and whiskey. You should have stayed out. I forced my voice to stay steady. Where are they? Margaret and Hugh. He smirked, leaning closer. Gone. Like the money. That's what happens when people forget who's in charge. My pulse pounded in my ears. I needed time. Anything to keep him talking. You'll never find the deed, I said. Lucan has it. He froze, eyes narrowing. What? I nodded slowly, bluffing for my life. He found it days ago. He's already talking to the police. Dalton's jaw tightened. He grabbed my chin roughly, forcing me to look at him. You're lying. Am I? I whispered. Outside in the distance, I thought I heard sirens. Faint, far away, but real. He didn't notice them yet. I had managed, before everything went black, to hit the emergency ping on my phone. All I needed was to keep him here. He started pacing, running a hand through his hair. No one double-crosses me, he hissed. Then, as if making up his mind, he grabbed another length of rope and tied my wrists tighter. The fibers dug deeper into my skin. Lucan, he said bitterly. He always thought he was smarter than Caleb, but he's just another coward. My breath caught. What do you mean? He stopped pacing. His eyes flicked toward me, calculating. You think your husband's innocent? He's been cleaning up after his brother for years. Paperwork, transfers, cover-ups. They all come to me eventually. The room spun. Before I could speak, the sound of tires screeched outside. Doors slammed. Shouting. Dalton's head snapped toward the window. Police! Someone yelled. He cursed under his breath, grabbed his coat, and reached for the drawer where he'd hidden a gun. I didn't think. My chair tipped as I threw my weight sideways, crashing to the floor. The gun clattered, sliding across the wood. Then the door burst open. Lucan rushed in first, face pale and terrified, followed by Detective Harris and 2 officers. Drop it! Harris shouted. Dalton spun around, hands raised halfway, eyes darting between Lucan and me. You think this fixes it? He yelled. He was in on it too. Ask him about the payments, the offshore accounts. He was right there when his brother signed the papers. Lucan's face went slack, the truth spilling into the room before he could stop it. Lucan, I said quietly, is that true? He didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Dalton laughed, bitter and raw. See? The golden boy, just as dirty as the rest of them. But this time, I didn't let the chaos control me. I pushed myself up, blood still rushing in my ears, and reached for my cracked phone. I hit play. Margaret's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, something has gone wrong. Dalton, he did this. He forged the contracts, took the money, threatened our lives. We tried to fix it, but he said he'd burn everything. He said no one would believe us if we spoke. The room went still. Dalton's expression collapsed from rage to panic. She was lying, he stammered, but his voice had lost all weight. Detective Harris moved forward. You're done, Reese. Dalton tried to bolt, but the officers were faster. They pinned him to the ground, his curses muffled under the weight of their knees. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the house like punctuation. Lucan fell to his knees beside the door, shaking, his hands covering his face. I thought I was protecting them, he whispered. I thought if I stayed quiet. I watched him crumble, but the sympathy I once felt was gone. There was only exhaustion, deep, bone deep. Harris turned to me. Mrs. Rhodes, are you all right? I nodded, though I wasn't sure. My wrists ached, my throat burned, but inside, a strange calm spread through me. The storm had broken. As I stepped outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, lighting the porch in pale gold. The yard was still muddy, the paint still peeling, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. On the wall inside, a single photo still hung. Margaret, Hugh, Lucan, and Caleb, all smiling in front of this very house. The glass was cracked down the middle, but the frame held. I whispered to it, to her. A house built on secrets will always crack from within. This time, it didn't sound like a curse. It sounded like a promise. Detective Harris joined me at the car, his tone gentle. Will you testify? I looked back at the house, its windows hollow but somehow peaceful. No, I said quietly. I'll rebuild it. He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. Because some ghosts don't need banishing, they need witnesses. It's been 3 months since that night. The air around the house feels different now. Lighter, warmer, as if the walls themselves are finally breathing again. The workers left last week, and for the first time I walked through the front door without that old, sinking dread. The scent of fresh paint mixed with cedar polish drifted through the hallway, where the smoke stains once clawed at the ceiling, now soft ivory paint reflected the morning light. I ran my fingers along the banister, new, smooth, steady. There was no echo of the past in it, only the sound of living. "Mom! Watch this!" Liam's voice rang out, bright and unburdened. He raced down the hallway, his small feet thumping against the new wooden floor. In his hands was the same teddy bear we found in the wardrobe months ago, the one that used to make him cry whenever he saw it. Now he held it high like a trophy, giggling as it bounced in the air. It hit me then. The house wasn't haunted. We were, by grief, by silence, by everything we didn't say. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight pouring across the rug, and felt something loosen inside me. The space that once swallowed our pain had become a place where laughter could survive again. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the wind sway the oak trees. The paintbrushes and empty paint cans were stacked neatly by the steps, a quiet reminder of what rebuilding really means. It's never just the walls you fix. I heard the screen door creak. Lucan stepped out, his face thinner, a few more lines around his eyes, but there was something new there, too. Peace. He handed me a folded envelope. "It's from the insurance settlement," he said softly. "You could have taken everything. You didn't." I sipped my coffee and looked straight ahead. I didn't need to. I just needed it to stop. He nodded slowly. "I wanted to thank you." "For not walking away." I smiled faintly. "I didn't stay for you. I stayed for the truth." For a long time, we just sat there in silence. No accusations, no apologies, just the sound of the wind moving through the trees, the creak of the swing beneath us. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was understanding. And sometimes, that's even rarer. When the sun dipped lower, I went back inside. The house glowed in the golden light. On the wall near the staircase, the old family photo still hung, Margaret, Hugh, Lucan, and Caleb smiling as if time never found them. The glass was cracked, but the picture held together. Next to it, I hung a new frame. Liam stood between me and Lucan, his grin wide, his eyes full of light. The contrast between the two photos made my throat tighten, but not from pain, from completion. I whispered to the empty air, "A house built on truth will never fall again." For the first time, the echo that came back wasn't sorrow, it was stillness. A few weeks later, Elise published her article. The headline read, "The Quiet Widow Who Rebuilt the House of Shadows." I almost didn't recognize myself in her words, yet there I was, stronger, not spotless, but whole. Detective Harris came by soon after. He stood on the porch, handed me a folded note, and smiled that quiet smile of his. "You might not want to read it now," he said, "but someday you will." After he left, I opened it. Inside, in neat handwriting, were 5 simple words. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. That night, I sat at my desk with the windows open. Crickets hummed outside. The house no longer groaned or whispered. It rested. I thought about everything that had happened, about Margaret's warning, Dalton's rage, Lucan's silence, and realized the truth had never been about winning. It was about breathing again. I volunteer now at a trauma recovery center downtown. I talk with families who've lived through loss, violence, or silence too heavy to bear. Sometimes they ask me how I did it, how I found peace after everything. I tell them peace isn't found. It's built, one nail, one wall, one truth at a time. As I close the doors each evening, I catch sight of the house glowing softly under the porch light. Liam's laughter sometimes drifts through the open windows, mixing with the sound of the wind. And I know, every board, every wall, every quiet space carries the memory of what was and the promise of what will be. Because sometimes the scariest places aren't haunted by ghosts, but by silence. And when you finally speak, the whole house can breathe again.